What's going on, guys? Glad to see you here today. Given that you clicked on this video, you know what we're talking about, and that's the strongest Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet in Post-Home. But what I forgot to mention in the title, probably, is that we're mainly talking about the Smogon overused for competitive singles. Why OU specifically? Because I've been getting more and more into competitive singles as of recent because a buddy of mine won't stop talking to me about his sun team and how it's hard to switch in the Terra Water Hydro Steam from Walking Wake when in the sun. His passion has sparked a new one into me, and so I've been gaming and watching other videos. I've broadened my horizons and learned about the agency, and how much of a terror to the metagame that Iron Mugulus is. So as someone hopping into competition again, playing some of the metagame, as well as learning about it through other sources, from YouTubers to my more competitive buddies, I've compiled a list of the ones I think are the best, or at least my favorites to use. I'm not gonna go word for word on the usage rates, and I'll be mostly using my opinions combined with what are very clear facts about the tier. So don't get surprised if number 1 is exactly who you think it is if you've played the tier. And one last thing, since it's OU at the start of this video, don't expect mons that were OU at the start of Post-Home metagame to pop up. Chi and Pao, Valcorona, Zacian Crown, and Regieleki are banned from this list like they're banned from the tier. For the honorable mentions, I'm gonna list honestly several Pokemon, because there are a lot of really good Pokemon in Overused. And if I talked about the entire tier, we would be here all day. So here's every Pokemon that could be in this spot, but just missed the cut. However, because I have too much to say about them, we're doing this as a bit of a quick lightning round. With that, start the beat. I'm Poke-Rapping it. Walking Wake, Sneasler, Corviknight, Hatterene, Dondozo, Heatran, Rotom, Wash, Landorus. That was pretty bad. There are plenty more. Some will even come up as I talk about other Pokemon. These 10 are just 9 really good fixtures. And then our number 10, who turned a gimmick strat into a viable option. Whether or not everything in the honorable mentions is actually better than Ursa Luna, I'm unsure. However, I think it warrants the number 10 spot due to its excellent attack and bulk, along with the fact that it has 2 excellent abilities, being Guts and Bulletproof. The Guts variant, after a Terra Normal, Swords Dance along with a Guts boost, can clearly OHKO defensive Corviknight, and such a KO is guaranteed after Stealth Rock is up, assuming Corv isn't on boots. I've seen Ursa Luna use Terra Ghost just to beat other Ursa Luna, which I found to be pretty funny. The main downside of Ursa Luna is that its speed stat and the burn from Flame Orb whittling it down can be rather infuriating. However, due to how insanely hard this Pokemon hits, it has become the mascot of Trick Room-based strategies that turn Ursa Luna from the slowest thing on the field to the fastest, and let you completely crush the metagame beneath your feet. People thought that the bear was going to be broken, with powerful attacks like Facade, Headlong Rush, and Ice Punch for coverage to destroy Landorus T. But it wound up being, for the most part, pretty solidly manageable. Trick Room and Ursa Luna have a place in the tier. Now, whether or not the 20% chance Quick Claw does is a very different question that I'm not going to answer. I will admit a majority of the Pokemon on this list are going to be offensive. While Stall has a place in the metagame, and Pokemon like Alola, Clodsire, Garganacl, and Toxapex are all pretty solid Pokemon in their own right, I don't think they reach the heights that a lot of Pokemon on this list do. So before I just talk about the many offensive threats that rule over Pokemon's OU tier, the damage they deal, and all that good stuff, I'm gonna discuss my favorite defensive Pokemon to use in competitive singles. And I find myself partnering up with Cinderace and Rotom Wash somewhat frequently on teams. I think a Mungus has to be the defensive Pokemon of the tier. Access to Spore to put something to sleep, solid stats for what it's trying to do, the ability to play either physically or specially bulky, and the ability Regenerator give it a lot of staying power. It has Foul Play to punish Dragapult, some chip damage to Goldango on the switch. It's able to stomach attacks from Enamorous and force it out. And if it's on Rocky Helmet, it can serve as a good threat to Hisui and Samurott if you lead a Mungus against it. Giga Drain also does wonders, and Synthesis is an excellent recovery move, especially with Sun sometimes popping up in the meta. I typically use it as a special defense tank so it can come in on a Draco Meteor from a Specs Dragonpole and threaten the Samurott. It's honestly incredibly amazing. I originally didn't want to put Enamorous here. However, it's actually incredibly good. Its Q-Charm ability makes you basically play as many female mons as possible so you don't make contact with it and get infatuated. And its contrary ability lets it use superpower to buff itself and make for a great mixed attacker. Moonblast, Mystical Fire, and Earth Power are all great coverage moves, and the ability to make excellent use of Choice Scarf, Specs, Heavy Duty Boots, Life Orb, and sometimes even Leftovers gives it a lot of item variety. There are also Combine sets on the Q-Charm variants that can snowball against slower or weakened teams that give it the opportunity to sweep. It matches up very well against the meta at large, and might be one of the greatest fairy types this tier has ever gotten. Not to mention, if we're being honest for ourselves, her existence is the sole reason why Garchomp nearly dropped down to UU, and very well could drop at some point. If that day comes, I'm gonna be a sad man, and probably so will Finchinator. The best Terras I have seen used for Enamorous are Fairy to buff its Moonblast, and Ground to beat Electric and Rock types. Having a boosted Earth power to wipe steals off the face of the Earth is pretty nice. I will always hold Gholdengo in high regard. While it is no longer as ubiquitous as it once was in the tier, due to more answers being introduced, like the aforementioned Terra Ground Enamorous, along with stuff like Hisui and Samurott being able to cut through it with Ceaseless Edge, alongside the already good answers to it like Offensive Great Tusk, Roaring Moon, Kingambit, and Dragapult if you weren't running a good Terra to beat them with, it's still safe to say that Gholdengo absolutely has its place in the tier. Make It Rain is a phenomenal move. Shadow Ball, Thunderbolt, Dazzling Gleam, and Focus Miss are pretty solid options too. If not just Terra fighting Terra Blast, or Terra Fairy to amp your Dazzling Gleams, all while beating pre-established checks. It's also got Nasty Plot, Thunder Wave, and Recover, which have allowed it to cook up some pretty dangerous substitute sets if it wasn't using the Scarf variant and using Trick to cripple your defensive options. Air Balloon has also been a staple item on it to avoid Great Tusk's ground attacks, and Leftovers is always a fine option as well. It's got some versatility, decent speed and bulk, and a monstrous special attack stat. But what makes it really special is Good as Gold. Being immune to status moves automatically makes you reliable against Big Stall, but being able to stop Defog while having the type combination to defeat Mortal and Rapid Spin, this Pokemon is the reason why, even with Great Tusk and Iron Treads in the tier that spin everything away at a moment's notice, that hazard stacking offense is as good of a playstyle as it is. Alright, so the gatekeeper to number 5 here may as well be the move Dragon Dance, because I have not done something like this in a while. Remember my top 10 signature moves video when there was a 3-way tie? Well, I know what you're thinking. Mystic, surely you wouldn't make what is essentially a top 12 and all those honorable mentions just to demonstrate the diversity of the metagame, would you? And to answer that question for me is Dragonite, Baxcalibur, and Roaring Moon. However, because this is a 3-way tie, I'm going to be incredibly brief with what I call Dragon Dance Gang, since I am putting 3 Pokemon on the list. First and foremost, Dragon Dance. Second and foremost, Solid Speed, or Amazing if you're Roaring Moon. And thirdly, the ability to utterly clean the heck out of most teams in the tier after 1 or 2 Dragon Dances. These 3 are the poster children for turning one free turn into a game win. Dragonite's Terra Normal Extreme Speed, access to Roost and Encore for utility, and Earthquake and Fire Punch for coverage, along with Outrage if you just don't fear fairies, can make it quite the menace. Roaring Moon? Terra Flying Acrobatics will be a favorite, because booster energy to boost attack Set up Dragon Dance and Terra flying to sweep an entire team is just an old reliable, even back in the early days of the tier. Baxcalibur is the highest one, viability ranking wise, and access to Glaive Rush, which is pretty much just better Outrage, Iron Head, Earthquake, Ice Shard, Icicle Spear, and the ability to run a Swords Dance set if it wants to give it some extra variety. Not to mention, it's the best partner for the Slow Kings, who will use Chilly Reception to tag into it and give it a physical defense buff of snow. And it's also the one that can't be burned thanks to Thermal Exchange. These three are all phenomenal, and the only tie on this video because they all do very similar stuff. Bax is arguably the best one, but I wanted to give all of them the spotlight. Back in the olden days of Black and White, if you had told me that Samurott was going to be good, I would have scoffed at you and told you to get off the cope. Samurott will never be good, and I will never use it competitively. I'd say in disgust of such a stupid, bold claim. And then, in 2023, when this video was made, I would be introduced to not just any Samurott, but the greatest Samurott there ever was. One with the ability Sharpness to give it a free choice band when using cutting moves, a signature attack that stab, benefits from Sharpness and sets up spikes with no risk, extra physical bulk, and a neat new dark typing to make it immune to Prankster and resist Sucker Punch while complementing my water typing, which is used to defeat the many ground types of the tier. Not to mention it has Stab Sucker Punch, access to Knockoff, and makes excellent use of Razor Shell and Sacred Sword, and can even play Aqua Jet slightly better than the old version. It can play Assault Vest, Choice Scarf, and Choice Band. While dedicated leads are a thing of the past, if Scarlet and Violet OU were to have a dedicated lead, a Pokemon like this that can spam Ceaseless Edge with no immunity to it would be just that. Samurott fans are eating well, as their baby boy has finally become the OU staple they wanted for eons. If the list didn't feel predictable when I was talking about Samurott, it would now. I'm pretty sure these next 4 Pokemon are some of the most obvious picks for the list that any person who played the tier can tell you. However, this is a situation where I would prefer to be correct in my take, and I happen to hold the same exact opinion that these 4 are the best in the tier. Iron Valiant is going to kick us off at number 4 due to the fact that its unique typing combination, excellent speed tier, offensive prowess, and serviceable coverage give it every tool it needs to win, along with booster energy activating its Cork Drive, which makes it even faster and lets it clean weakened teams like a janitor cleans a messy hallway. The 2 sets I have seen the most are a Terra Fairy mix set with Calm Mind, Close Combat, Moonblast, and either Psyshock or Thunderbolt. And then a pure physical Terra Dark set with Swords Dance, Knockoff, Close Combat, and Encore to lock setup mons and give it that turn the Swords Dance and sweep. Both of these had booster energy. No matter how the meta shifts, Iron Valiant will find a way to be good. It's near perfect. Off the top of your head, what's a Pokemon that can do everything? Mew? Good guess, but not what I'm looking for. Smeargle? Yeah, back in Gen 6 VGC, I'm sure it did. And by that, I mean it clicked Dark Void and made Game Freak mad. Arceus? I mean, yeah, sure I guess. But that's to be expected from God. All of these, however, are too slow to be who I am talking about. So get these posers out of here, and let me explain to you the power and versatility of who I personally believe to be the most threatening Pokemon in the metagame. Dragonpole is and has always been good, and it can actually do just whatever it wants. While in the beginning, it was mostly Choice Specs Draco Meteor, and that set is still very common. That's not all it can do. Want to set up instead? It gets Dragon Dance and can use Dragon Darts, Terra Ghost, Terra Blast, and either U-turn for pivoting or Fire Blast to hit steals. Want to be annoying and seem bulkier than you are? Will-O-Wisp, Substitute, Hex, and Dragon Darts. Want to set up screens? Light Clay is still in the tier. set up screens, and then use Curse to remove yourself, get Chip, and safely get in a sweeper. And the worst part is, it can basically hold any item it wants and can mix and match all these sets. You can get randomly taken out by the rare Sucker Punch if you thought your faster and more frail Mon would take it out. It can actually do anything, hold any item, and play any role it wants on your team. Pivot, offense, defense-ish, screens, or some stuff in between. This is the single most versatile Mon in the tier, and that aura of mystery is what makes it so terrifying. Also, it's very fast. Bisharp never really needed an evolution. Or at least that's what I would be saying if they didn't take Knockoff away from it when it moved from Gen 8 to Gen 9. Eviolite and a new evolution were definitely a very neat consultation, and arguably a very worthy trade-off. As now, Bisharp can attain power it never had before, and actually have the bulk it's been missing throughout its entire competitive career. They really gave an OU Pokemon an evolution that is even more OU. They haven't done something similar since I believe Gen 1 to Gen 2 when Chansey evolved into Blissey. But the difference is that Blissey was only ever good on Stall in Gen 2, while Kingambit is good at everything. Supreme Overlord has to be one of the most absurd abilities I have seen given to anything. Its attack and bulk are nothing to scoff at, it can run multiple good Terras, and has made use of leftovers more than I have seen of any setup sweeper. Swords Dance, Sucker Punch, Kotal Cleave, and Iron Head, with either black glasses or leftovers, is the standard. But don't be afraid to experiment. Terra Blast is amazing on it due to the fact that Terra Fire beats other Kingambit while preventing burns, Terra Fairy and Flying beat Kingambit, and Terra Dark just makes its Swords Dance and Supreme Overlord boosted Sucker Punches even more lethal to deal with. You can get outplayed the whole game and still find a way to win with this Pokemon. I never leave team preview without this guy on the back of my team, because he will just carry me if I weaken the opposing team enough. Bro is disgusting, and sometimes very hard to play around. So yeah, it's as used as it is for a reason, but somehow kept in check by some of the more powerful physical walls in the metagame. Generation 9 is truly unique in its absurdity, and I love it. So, remember when we talked about Pokemon that can keep Kingambit in check? Yeah, this is one of them. But that's not all it does. Remember how Landorus Therian used to be this guy? Well, anyways, we're posting the image from r/Stunfisk now. Landorus Tusk, Great Tusk, is number 1 for a reason in usage. And it's number 1 on this list because I'm not gonna come out and try to make some bold take and act like there is a Pokemon in the tier that is better than this dude. It can run defensive, it can run offensive, it can run booster energy, leftovers, heavy duty boots, rocky helmet, assault vest, and probably some other weird item and still be useful. Rapid Spin, Knockoff, Body Press, Headlong Rush, Ice Spinner, Close Combat, Earthquake, and of course Stealth Rock that it too can set up. It's not a Pokemon that is overpowered, and it's not on here because it's stronger than some of the more unreliable threats in the tier. Although base 131 attack is absolutely nice, and it's not like the power gap is too high. It's here because its ability to fill a role in a team, be natural blanket coverage with its mixture of offense and defense, and the coverage it needs to slap something that your team might not naturally check, makes it kind of like a glue that can hold the team together. Sure, it's got some questionable special defense, but that's nothing you can't work around with proper play and team building. And don't even get me started on the amount of good Terra types it can run. Now, with that said, to the Landorus Therian fans out there, Landorus T does have Intimidate and U-turn to pivot, and can play Grass Knot to beat Tusk, like Tusk can use Ice Spinner to beat Landorus. With both of these in the tier, OU has become a bit more interesting to me as a result. And that's pretty much it. Those are the top 10 strongest Pokemon after the Pokemon Home update for Scarlet and Violet. What'd you guys think of this list? Would you guys change anything? If so, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below.